In this episode, we're going to start to get some practice evaluating expressions in the context of geometry, calculating different measurements for different shapes and objects. Now, in the first part, the specific variety of shape that I want to focus on is a shape that's called a rectangle. A rectangle is a shape that looks like this object drawn here on the right side. This object has four straight sides, and those sides can be thought of as being in two pairs. This pair of sides, as well as this other pair of sides. These sides in the pairs have the same length, and they're pointing in the same direction. So to give you an example of a shape that would not be a rectangle, just for contrast, if I had a shape that looked like this one, this would not be a rectangle for a variety of reasons. This would not be a rectangle because these uh, pairs of lines are not the same length. As well, these pairs of lines are not pointing in the same direction. To give you another example of a shape that would not be a rectangle, if I gave you something like this, a really rough drawing, this would not be a rectangle because it has five sides. And another example of something that would not be a rectangle is something like one of these. This would not be a rectangle because the sides are not straight. In order to be a rectangle, you have to have four straight sides that you can divide up into pairs, where the lines in the pairs have the same length and they're pointing in the same direction. That's what makes a rectangle. Now, when you're dealing with a two-dimensional object, for example, like a rectangle, one of the things that you can measure for this object is what's called the object's perimeter. And the perimeter is the total length of all the sides. Now, when you're dealing with a rectangle, and if you said, I'm going to call the length of these two sides L, L for length, and I'm going to call the other two sides W, maybe W for width. If I wanted to find the perimeter of an object like this one, all I would have to do is go around the rectangle and add together the length of all four of the sides. W plus L plus W plus L, this expression would represent the steps I would have to take to calculate the perimeter of any given rectangle. So if, for example, someone told me, I'm thinking of a rectangle that has a length of 3 feet and a width of 2 feet, what would be the perimeter of a rectangle like that one? To find the perimeter of a rectangle with these measurements, all I have to do is go around the rectangle and find the total length of all the sides. In other words, I just have to add together the width, the length, the width, the length, and the total of those specific values in this specific example would be 10. So 10 feet would be the perimeter of this particular rectangle. To give you an example of where perimeter might show up in a physical calculation in the real world, suppose I'm making a rectangular garden bed and I want to surround the garden bed with fencing. If you live in Washington, you know we have a ton of deer, we have a ton of rabbits running around everywhere. So you have to fence in your garden beds if you don't want the deer and the rabbits to eat all of your food. Now, I want the garden bed to have a length of 2.25 feet and a width of 8.5 feet. So if I want to make my garden bed with these measurements, how much fencing would I need to surround it? So this is a perimeter question in disguise. If I want to build a fence around the entire garden bed, then I need fencing to cover this 2.25 feet of length, this 8.5 feet of width, then this side up here, and then this side over here, right? So going all the way around and fencing in the entire garden bed, I would have to add together 2 copies of 8.5 and 2 copies of 2.25. So all in total, the result of that calculation is 21.5 feet. So this is how we calculate perimeter. Perimeter can be calculated just by adding up the lengths of all the sides of your object. And for specifically a rectangle that has specifically 4 sides, where the sides are in pairs of equal length, you just have to add together the 2 lengths of the rectangle with the 2 widths of the rectangle. Now, when you're dealing with shapes, the other quantity that we use to measure and understand the shape is something called area. An area, roughly speaking, is how big the inside of the shape is. Perimeter was how far you had to go if you were walking around the outside of the shape, whereas area is a measurement of how big is the inside of the shape. Now, to find the area of a rectangle specifically, the formula that we use is that the area can be found by taking the length of the rectangle and multiplying it by the width of the rectangle. Area is equal to length times width, so the expression that I might write down is L times W. To say once you know your length and once you know your width, just plug them in to this formula and you can use that formula to find the area of the rectangle. So for example, somebody says, I'm thinking about a rectangle with a length of 3 feet and a width of 2 feet. What would the area of a rectangle be? The area can be found just by taking the length, 3 feet, and multiplying it by the width, 2 feet. 3 times 2 gives me 6, so 6 would be the area of this rectangle. And the units that we use for area are what are called square units. In this case, it would be square feet. You might also see this as SQFT or FT squared. And a square foot is just the size of a square that is 1 foot by 1 foot. I have an amount of area in my rectangle that is equal to 6 of these because I have 3 feet of length rather, and 2 feet of width. So I have 6 square feet, 6 little squares making up the size of the inside of this rectangle, 6 square feet. So for an example of an area problem, maybe I'm pouring a concrete patio in the shape of a rectangle. And I have enough concrete to cover 30 square feet of area based on however thick I want to make my patio. Now, my hope is that my patio will end up being 3 feet long by 7 feet wide. So the question is, if I want my patio to be of this size and I have this much concrete, do I have enough concrete to actually build the patio that I have in mind? Well, the area of the patio could be found by taking its width and its length and multiplying them together. 6 feet by 7 feet, 6 times 7, length times width. 6 times 7 is 42. So I would have a 42 square feet of area of this patio. So I do not have enough concrete for this job.